In this video, we will be demoing the functionality of our Gmail application. We will be demonstrating how our Gmail application uses data from restricted and sensitive scopes that our application is requesting. To use our application, the user must first authenticate with an account associated with a Google Workspace account, in other words, an enterprise account. Non-Google Workspace accounts such as gmail.com and googlemail.com accounts will not be allowed to connect and use our Gmail application. We will demonstrate that functionality shortly. But first, let's begin by authenticating with an account associated with a Google Workspace. To do that, we will select Choose a Connection. Since we don't already have one, we will create a new one. And we will call that new connection Gmail. And we'll select Create. And then as you can see, this is the name of our application. Let me show you the client ID of our application. I'm going to paste it over here so make it easier to see. And let me pull up the client ID. And as you can see, this is the client ID of our application. All right, let's go back to the previous dialog. And I will be selecting a Google account associated to a Google Workspace. In this case, I'm going to select this one right here. Then we will allow the following permissions to our Gmail application. Then we can review the permissions that we are granting our application and select Allow. This will create the connection in our application. This is indicated by the green check mark you see here. So our application consists of different functions. The first function we have here is a send email function. What this function does, it sends emails to the recipients in the to and CC headers. Scope that we are requesting to implement this function is the gmail.send scope. And the method that we are implementing from the Gmail API is the following one. Let me pull it up. And it's the users.send messages.send method. And the scope that is one of the scopes required to implement that method is the gmail.send scope, which is what we are requesting in our application. Another function in our Gmail application is the read email function. What this function does, it returns the message details of a specified message. The scope that is required to use this method is the Gmail read-only scope. And let me pull up the API docs to show which method in the Gmail API we are referencing. And that method is the user's messages get method. And one of the scopes to use that method is the gmail.read-only scope, which is what we are requesting for our Gmail application. And then we also have the forward emails function. What this function does, it creates a forwarding address. This method is only available to service account clients that have been delegated domain-wide authority. And the scopes that we are using to implement this function are the gmail.settings sharing scope and the cloud platform scope. Let me pull up the Gmail API docs to show you which method in the Gmail API we are referencing to implement that method. And that method is the user settings forwarding address create method. And the scope required to use that method is the Gmail settings sharing scope, which is what we are requesting. Something to know about this method is that it's only available to service account clients that have been delegated domain-wide authority. So in order to allow our users to use this method, we are listing the cloud projects that the users have access to and the service accounts that they have access to as well, so they can select the appropriate service account to use this method. So let me pull up the method in the Google API that we are referencing to list the projects that the user has access to, and that method is the projects of this method. And one of the scopes required to implement this method is the cloud platform scope, which is what we are requesting in our application. And then let me go back to our flow. And then additionally, we are also listing service accounts that the user or caller has access to. And the method in the Google API that we are referencing is the project service accounts list method. This method requires the use of one of the following scopes. The one we are requesting is the Auth Cloud Platform scope. And just to reiterate, these scopes, the reason we are using the scope is to list the projects that the caller has access to, and then depending on the project they select, list the service accounts in that project that the user has access to, so that they can select an appropriate account to use this function in our application. So let me just show that. So the user will first select a Google Cloud project that they have access to. In this case, I'm going to select this one. And then selecting a project will then populate the service accounts in that project. In this case, we have this Gmail service account. And then just to reiterate again, this method is used to list the Google Cloud projects the caller has access to. And then once the user selects a project, this method is used to list service accounts that are in the project that the user selects. Again, both those methods use this scope. Let me click save. And then finally, we have the set auto reply function. What this function does, it updates vacation responder settings by setting an auto reply message. The scopes we are requesting for this application are the Gmail settings basic scope and also the cloud platform scope. Let me pull up the Gmail API docs to show you which method we are referencing in the API docs to implement this function in our application. And that method is the user settings update vacation method. And the scope that's required to use that method is the Gmail settings basic scope. And then similarly, we are doing the same thing as a previous function, where we are listing the projects and also listing the service accounts. So let me show that as well. So we select the project and then select a service account in that project. Okay. Once we have that, our flow is ready to be run. Let me just first save it and then run it. This first method will send the email, and then we will take the message ID and then read that email. And then this method will create a forwarding address, and this final method or function will create or set an auto reply message. As I mentioned previously, we will also be demoing that non-Google Workspace accounts such as gmail.com and googlemail.com accounts are not allowed to create a connection and use our application. So let me demo that for you. Let me create a new connection. I'm gonna call this one non-enterprise. And this time I'm gonna select an account that is not associated to a Google Workspace. In this case, I'm gonna select this one. It's just a regular gmail.com account. Doing this, we will then allow. But once we select allow, the connection will fail. And let me just change all of them. And you can see like connection failure is detected for all of these connections that we are switching. So let me just close this out. As you can see, we no longer have a green check mark for that new connection that we created with a non-enterprise account. And that's the same for the rest of these over here. So let me run this flow and show you that this will also not work. As you can see, an error message is displayed for the user, indicating that they are forbidden from using this function in our application, and the same is true for the rest of our functions. Thank you.